Hello, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Into the Killing. In today's episode, we'll discuss one of the most notorious cold cases in the history of New Jersey. There are plenty of twists and turns before the case finally went to trial. The case we're talking about began 30 years ago. In the spring of 1991, 23-year-old Michelle Lodzinski and her 5-year-old son, Timothy Wiltsey, lived in South Amboy, New Jersey. South Amboy is one part of a pair of municipalities called the Amboys. In early 1991, South Amboy had a population of around 7,800 people. Lodzinski and Timothy's father, George Wiltsey, weren't together. George lived in Walker, Iowa. Lodzinski had left George when Timothy was 6 months old. He had not seen his son in the years since she left. Lodzinski worked as a senior secretary for a retail catalog store in nearby Edison, New Jersey. May 25, 1991 was the Saturday of the Memorial Day long weekend. The Elks Club was running a carnival in Sayreville, New Jersey, which is about 2.5 miles from South Amboy. Supposedly, Lodzinski and Timothy went that evening. Supposedly, Lodzinski put Timothy on 2 or 3 rides. At around 7:30 p.m., Lodzinski got in line to wait to buy a soft drink. Timothy didn't like waiting in line, so he supposedly stood a few feet from his mother. Lodzinski said that Timothy was only out of her sight for 2 or 3 minutes. She claims that when she went back to get him, he was missing. When she realized Timothy was gone, she found her 15-year-old niece who was at the carnival and told her that she couldn't find Timothy. Together, they searched the carnival for 30 minutes and then her niece called the police. The police were there within a few minutes, and the carnival was immediately shut down. A search involving police officers and volunteers began soon afterward. Lodzinski told searchers that Timothy was wearing a red tank top, red shorts, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle sneakers. About 200 people searched until 3 a.m. and found nothing. The searches resumed again at 6 a.m. Police dogs and helicopters searched the park and a dive team searched a nearby lake. But Sunday ended without any trace of Timothy being found. On Monday, the FBI joined in on the search. But their assistance didn't help in locating the 5-year-old boy. The police questioned Michelle Lodzinski about what she did that day. She said that before coming to the fair, she and Timothy spent several hours at a park that was about 15 miles from the carnival. They arrived at the carnival at about 7 p.m. The police questioned many people who were at the carnival that night. Only one person said that they remembered seeing a boy that matched Timothy's description. A carnival worker who operated a ride said that he put a boy who matched Timothy's description on a ride. But the police did not consider this a credible sighting. The police talked to the woman who was standing beside Lodzinski when she was buying her drink. She told the police that Lodzinski didn't say anything about her missing child and she didn't seem anxious. The police thought that this was odd because parents instinctually panic and often become frantic when they can't find their children. The police also interviewed Lodzinski's niece. She thought that Lodzinski had a calm demeanor and she didn't seem upset that Timothy was missing. The police interviewed neighbors of Lodzinski and Timothy. Neighbors saw Timothy playing in the yard around noon. Besides his mother, this was the last confirmed sighting of Timothy. On Wednesday, May 29th, the police publicly said that Lodzinski had some inconsistencies in her account of the disappearance. 2 days later, on Friday, May 31st, a photo of Timothy was shown on America's Most Wanted, taking the story to a national audience for the first time. What people found striking is that Timothy went missing on May 25th, which is National Missing Children's Day. It was proclaimed that day in 1983 by President Ronald Reagan. It was in honor of 6-year-old Eden Patz, who went missing on May 25, 1979. Eden became famous after being one of the first missing children to be featured on milk cartons. But national attention did not bring any leads to the whereabouts of Timothy Wiltsey. June 4, 1991 was the graduation day for Timothy's kindergarten class. Sadly, he had not been found. While her son was missing, Lodzinski mostly stayed out of the public eye, and she even moved out of her home. She told the press, "Everyone is waiting to see a grieving mother on TV break down, crying, hysterical, just because the public, they thrive on that stuff. But I'm not going to do that." The searches for Timothy continued, but nothing was found. On June 11th, a local dairy company announced that they would be printing Timothy's photo on its milk cartons. On June 13th, detectives brought Michelle Lodzinski to the police station. It had been about 20 days since Timothy vanished. Detectives questioned her all day. After hours of being interviewed, Lodzinski ended up being taken to the hospital because she had been hyperventilating. She spent about 13 hours in the hospital and then she was released. Months went by and no progress was made in the case. August 6, 1991 would have been Timothy's 6th birthday. About 100 people gathered at a local church, including many kids from Timothy's kindergarten class. 6 candles were lit to mark Timothy's birthday. The priest asked for everyone to pray for Timothy, his family, and his abductor or abductors. TV crews, reporters, and photographers were waiting outside the church, and later they spoke with the priest. Notably absent from the service was Timothy's mother, Michelle Lodzinski. A few months went by, and still no trace of Timothy was found. Also, no arrests were made in the case. Timothy went missing from Sayreville, and north of Sayreville is Edison, New Jersey. Splitting the two cities is the Raritan River. Not far from the banks of the river in Edison is a business park called the Raritan Center. On October 26, nearly 6 months after Timothy went missing, a science teacher was walking around some marshland behind the center. He was doing some bird watching. He happened to come across a muddy child's sneaker. It was white and it had a picture of a Ninja Turtle on it. The teacher was aware of Timothy's case, so he brought the shoe to the police station. When Timothy went missing, he was wearing child size 13 white Ninja Turtle themed shoes. The shoes were only a few months old, and Lodzinski still had the box. She gave the box to the police. The police determined that the shoes were stock number 0758. The shoe found in the marsh was child size 13, white, and had a picture of Raphael, who wears the red eye mask. The shoe also has stock number 0758. The police had Lodzinski come look at the shoe. She immediately told them it was not her son's shoe. She said that her son's shoes had multiple Ninja Turtles on them, not just one, and it was their bodies, not just their faces. A few weeks later, on November 18th, Lodzinski went back to the police station and looked at the shoe again. This time she said it might have been his shoe, but she couldn't say for sure. She said she wasn't sure because it had been a long time since she saw the shoes, and the one that was found was covered in mud. In the months that Timothy had been missing, the police searched the area around the Raritan Center, but they never found any trace of him. About a week later, Michelle Lodzinski held a press conference. She was asked why she didn't appear to be more upset that her only child was missing. She said, "I don't show emotion in public, and I don't think I should have to because someone wants me to." The FBI was assisting with the case, and they decided to interview some of Lodzinski's friends. It turned out that the police had asked Lodzinski for a history of her employment, and she submitted one. But she omitted one job she had worked at from September 1988 to March 1989. That workplace was 4/10 of a mile away from where the shoe was found. FBI agents talked to a co-worker of Lodzinski's, whom she had been romantically involved with, and learned that she used to take walks in the area where the shoe was found during her lunch breaks. On April 23, 1992, a team of FBI agents began searching the marshland close to where the shoe was found. About 100 to 150 yards away from where the shoe was found, they came across a shallow grave that contained the skull of a young human. It was a muddy creek leading to a culvert that led to a roadway. The bottom part of the jaw was missing, and it has never been found. The crime scene was marked off, and firefighters used water to flush away debris in the area. They also used sifting screens in the creek. By the next day, more bones were recovered. Using dental records, a forensic dentist determined it was the remains of Timothy Wiltsey. His remains had been found 11 months after he went missing. Due to the state of the remains, a cause of death could not be determined. The police and the FBI were now investigating a homicide. We're just going to take a short break to bring you a word from our sponsor, Shudder. If you like horror, thrillers, and supernatural movies and series, you'll love Shudder. For good reason, Shudder is called the Netflix of horror. Shudder is the largest, fastest growing human-curated selection of thrilling and dangerous entertainment. I could spend hours recommending and discussing all the great movies on Shudder. They have fantastic movies in every subgenre of horror and thriller. One movie I highly recommend is The Autopsy of Jane Doe. It's a creepy, well-acted mystery movie that will keep you guessing until the very end. Shudder has a wide array of movies. They have everything from major blockbusters like Halloween and Scream to infamous cult classics like Cannibal Holocaust and Angst. They also have amazing series. Just one of them is Wolf Creek, which is based on the notorious 2005 film of the same name. Wolf Creek the series is as clever as it is frightening. Shudder has all this and so much more for just $5.99 a month and $56.99 for an annual subscription. Movies and series on Shudder are ad-free, uncut, and Shudder is easy to access. You can watch it on your favorite devices like your Google Chromecast, iPhone, iPad, or just do what I do and stream it using Amazon Fire TV. Get started streaming the best horror, thriller, and supernatural content. Shudder's expertly created collection includes must-see titles like Color Out of Space, Host, The Mortuary Collections, plus all the best horror documentaries and the hit Creepshow TV series from executive producer Greg Nicotero of The Walking Dead. To try Shudder for 30 days, go to Shudder.com and use the promo code listed. Once again, for your free 30-day trial, go to SHUDDER.com and then use the promo code listed. Even though Timothy's remains were found, no arrests were made in the wake of the discovery. A few weeks later, the police went public with shocking information. They said that in the weeks and months after Timothy's disappearance, Michelle Lodzinski had given them at least 4 different accounts of what happened on the night of the carnival. The first one was the original account she gave investigators. She was getting a soft drink, she had her back turned, and Timothy was gone when she went looking for him. On June 7th, Lodzinski had a slightly different story. She said she saw a woman she knew from her time as a bank teller. The woman's name was Ellen, and she was with two men. She said that Ellen was a go-go dancer, and she cashed her welfare checks at the bank. Ellen and the two men were standing near a child's ride. Lodzinski told them that she wanted to get a drink, and Ellen told her to go, and they would watch Timothy. So Lodzinski gave them some ride tickets, and then she went to get a drink. When she came back, they were gone. Less than a week later, on June 13th, she had another version of the story. In this story, Lodzinski said that one of the men with Ellen pulled out a knife. Lodzinski said that the man threatened her and told her that she would get a phone call about Timothy's reappearance in a month. But it turned out that Lodzinski had told her boyfriend a completely different story. She said that they were at the carnival and she needed more money. Lodzinski told her boyfriend that she, Timothy, Alan, and the two men went out to the parking lot to get more money from her car. When they got into the parking lot, Ellen pulled out a knife. Ellen said she would disfigure Timothy's cute face if she didn't leave. Fearing for the safety of her son, she let Ellen kidnap him. The police decided to track down the mysterious Ellen. They discovered that no woman named Ellen cashed her welfare checks at Lodzinski's bank while she worked there. Michelle Lodzinski took 2 polygraph exams. She took one 2 days after Timothy went missing and another one a week later. She failed both times. Although there was a lot of suspicion hanging around Lodzinski, the district attorney did not think that there was enough evidence to charge the mother with the murder of her 5-year-old son. Nearly 2 years went by, and then there was an odd twist in the case. Michelle Lodzinski's family reported her missing. On January 21, 1994, they found her car parked outside of her brother's home in Woodbridge, New Jersey. The car was running and her door was open. The next day, Michelle called her brother. She was over 600 miles away from her home in Detroit, Michigan. She was unharmed and she had an unusual story. She said she had been kidnapped by 2 men in a black vehicle who claimed they were FBI agents. They threatened to hurt her if she talked about her son's disappearance. Then they let her go in Detroit. The police immediately thought that her story was suspicious. They were planning on serving her with a subpoena around the same time that she went missing. It turned out that Lodzinski had a boyfriend who was a police officer. Shortly before Lodzinski went missing, she said she was being stalked. She asked her boyfriend to look up the license plates of the people who were following her. This was an illegal use of the police's computer system. In the end, no charges were brought against the police officer. The police investigated Lodzinski's supposed kidnapping, and they discovered she had taken a bus to Detroit. In September 1994, Lodzinski admitted that she had made up the kidnapping story. She pleaded guilty to filing a false report. In March 1995, she was given 3 years of probation and 6 months of modified house arrest. In November 1995, Michelle Lodzinski was working at a mechanical manufacturing plant in North Plainfield, New Jersey. She stole a $3,000 laptop from her workplace. She then gave the laptop to her boyfriend, the police officer, as a Christmas present. He tried to get the laptop serviced and found out it had been stolen. Lodzinski was arrested and charged with theft. She pleaded guilty, and in February 1998, she was given 3 years of probation. When she was sentenced, Lodzinski was pregnant. After the conviction, Lodzinski moved to Florida for a brief time. She then met and started dating a man who lived in Minnesota. Lodzinski moved to Minnesota, and the couple was married in 2001. Around the time she got married, she gave birth to another child. Both children that she had after Timothy's death were boys. Lodzinski's marriage to the man from Minnesota did not last very long. In 2003, Lodzinski and her 2 sons moved to Port St. Lucie, Florida. She got a job as a paralegal at a law firm that handles civil cases. August 6, 2014 would have been Timothy Wiltsey's 29th birthday. On that day, the police made a shocking move. They arrested 47-year-old Michelle Lodzinski for the first-degree murder of her son, Timothy. It turned out that 3 years earlier, cold case investigators were examining the case. A distinctive blanket was found near Timothy's remains. The police talked to people who knew Lodzinski and Timothy and showed them the blanket. 3 people who babysat Timothy said that it belonged to him. The police thought that the identification of the blanket was important for several reasons. The first is that on the night Timothy went missing, it was hot and humid. So it's doubtful he would have brought the blanket to the carnival with him. Also, Lodzinski gave several different accounts of what happened that night at the carnival. She had not once mentioned Timothy having a blanket. The police concluded that the blanket must have come from Lodzinski's home or car. Michelle Lodzinski's trial for the murder of her 5-year-old son started on March 16, 2016, nearly 25 years after the murder. The prosecution's case was entirely circumstantial. The most damning evidence was Lodzinski's changing narratives about what happened on the night Timothy went missing. Why would her story change so much unless she was hiding something? Also, none of her stories were validated. No one, except for one carnival worker, saw Timothy that night at the carnival. Also, Lodzinski blamed the kidnapping on a woman named Ellen who used to cash her checks at the bank where she was a teller. The police never found evidence of Ellen's existence. A mother whose child was missing would go to great lengths to help the police. But Michelle Lodzinski's stories hindered the investigation. The prosecutor also argued that she hindered the investigation by lying when she said she didn't recognize the sneaker. The prosecution argued that this was not the behavior of a woman whose son was kidnapped. Instead, it was the behavior of someone who was trying to cover up a crime. The prosecution had 3 babysitters testify that the blanket found near Timothy's remains belonged to him. They pointed out that Lodzinski never mentioned the blanket in any of her statements. It was also hot that night, about 90 degrees, so Timothy would not have been carrying the blanket around. So how did the blanket get dumped where the remains were found? If Timothy was truly kidnapped from the carnival, then the kidnapper would have had to steal the blanket and dump it with the body. There is no good reason the kidnapper would steal the blanket. Instead, the prosecutor said that Lodzinski killed her son earlier that afternoon and then dumped his body with the blanket. She went to the carnival alone and pretended Timothy was kidnapped. The defense argued that there was no physical evidence that proved Lodzinski killed her son. No cause of death had been determined, so it's not even clear that Timothy was murdered. If his death had been an accident or even suicide, how could Lodzinski be guilty of premeditated murder? The defense also had a carnival worker testify, and he said that he saw Timothy at the carnival. Since Timothy was at the carnival, Lodzinski would not have had enough time to kill him, drive to a different city that was across the river, dump the body, and then get back to the carnival and pretend that her son was missing. The defense also pointed out that there was no motive and there was no history of abuse. And finally, eyewitnesses saying that the blanket was Timothy's, even though they hadn't seen the blanket in over 2 decades, wasn't strong enough evidence to prove that the blanket belonged to Timothy. The trial lasted for 8 weeks. Then the jury deliberated for 8 hours. Michelle Lodzinski was found guilty of first-degree murder. In January 2017, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison without the chance of parole. In February 2020, the New Jersey Supreme Court agreed to hear an appeal filed by Lodzinski's lawyer. It turned out that about 5 hours into the jury's deliberation, it was revealed that the jury foreman had been doing his own research into the case. He was replaced with an alternate juror, and the jury deliberated for 3 more hours. Lodzinski's appeal argued that this should have resulted in a mistrial. Lodzinski's lawyers have filed another appeal that cites there was insufficient evidence for a conviction. If Lodzinski wins that appeal, then the state would not be able to try her again with the same evidence. If they wanted to try her again, they would need a new piece of definitive evidence that links her to the murder. At the time of this recording, the New Jersey Supreme Court has not scheduled a time to hear the appeals. At the time of this recording, 53-year-old Michelle Lodzinski is serving her sentence at the Edna Mahan Correctional Facility for Women in Clinton, New Jersey. Her earliest possible release date is August 4th, 2044. She will be 76 years old. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode. Our producer and sound designer is Danelle Cloutier. You can find a link to her Instagram in the description box. If you just discovered our podcast, please check out Criminally Listed on YouTube. We have over 275 videos featuring some riveting and chilling true crime stories. You can find it at youtube.com/criminallylisted. If you enjoyed this podcast, please follow or subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Next week, we'll look at the tragic murder of a 9-year-old girl. Her murder was finally solved 25 years later. It turned out she was murdered by an infamous serial killer. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the episode. Well, that's all for today. Thanks again for listening. Take care and please stay safe.